Okay, first let me say, I don't think this is a bad movie by any means. Christopher Nolan, the director, Interstellar, Dark Knight Rises, Inception, Memento, going back 10 years, all brilliant movies, all movies that I love. He's a great director, no one's saying otherwise. Hans Zimmer, who does the music, iconic. All the actors in this, the big budget, the topic, a great topic to make a movie about. So you're not going to get a bad movie, but I think that there are flaws in this movie that a lot of people are glossing over, and that's what I'm going to focus my review on. I can make a movie talking about, or a review talking about all the things I liked about the movie, but that's been done by countless hundreds of people by now, or more than hundreds of people by now at this point. I'm going to talk about some of the flaws that I think nobody's talking about. Okay, first major criticism I have, by many accounts, there were 400,000 people on that beach at Dunkirk. You never got a sense of that scale in this movie at all, and part of that was choice by the director. He didn't want to use things like CGI. He wanted everything to be more authentic. But I think that really hurt the film. If you watched that film and knew nothing about how many people were actually there, and then at the end you had to give an estimate, there's no way you would give an estimate any higher than 10,000. So you compare that estimate with the reality, which was 400,000 people. Are you honestly telling me you watched that movie and you got a sense of that scope of 400,000 people on that beach? No, I don't think anyone would say that. And I'm going to compare this movie to this one scene in Atonement of Dunkirk, and I'll put a link in the description, and if you watch this scene, this only a minute or so, and you compare just the scale and the sense of magnitude that you get in this one scene, and not only the sense of scale, and that'll bring me to my next point, but the sense of humanity, where you see all the different reactions to being stuck on the beach. You see the agony and the brutality and the wounded soldiers, and then you see the faith and the faith in humanity, the choir singing their song, and just you see the people, the normalcy that's developed, people just playing cards and people completely accepting their fate and looking no different than they would look on a beach on vacation. And you just get this sense of the scale, not only of the size and just how many people are stuck there, but just the scale of the full spectrum of humanity. And then you compare that to this movie, which I felt like the movie had so much more time to do all of this, and it just failed. And when you see just such a worse comparison to one scene in one movie, I feel like you can't help but be a little disappointed that Christopher Nolan didn't do more. And that brings me to my next point, where so many critics say this movie is a great example of minimalism, where he didn't get into the backstory of the conflict and the context. He didn't really delve into the stories of any of the characters. He just really focused his attention narrowly on what he wanted to communicate and didn't get bogged down in any kind of extra details. But I feel like if a lesser director did that, and not someone who is Christopher Nolan, they would just say that was a flaw. And they would just say, look at all the things that they didn't cover and that were left out. This is supposed to be, or this is going to be the de facto movie about this event, at least for our time. And look at all these things that were left out and weren't covered. And I feel like that's the bias we have with great directors. When they do something, we're automatically see it as a sign of their genius. When a lesser director does it, it's just a flaw. And I can't help but feel that Christopher Nolan spent so much of his focus on some more of the technical details of directing and of making a movie, rather than going to some of these ordinary civilians who participated in this great rescue mission and talk to them and hear their stories and their anecdotes and say, what was the last thing you said to your wife before you left, or what was going through your mind, and then include some of this. So just humanize it a little bit, or talk more about the military commanders who are making these decisions of whether or not to do this rescue mission and why they had to do it and why it was important, and talk about why Dunkirk was so important to the conflict and why it matters so much. And I get you don't want to spoon feed the audience too much and spell everything out, and some stuff can be kind of more ambiguous, but I do think some more effort put into explaining why this was so significant would have helped. And one rationalization I've heard for why he didn't include these more humanizing elements of the backstories of the characters or the decisions by the military commanders is he just wanted to focus on the war is hell aspect, and he didn't want to glamorize it at all, and he just wanted to really show just how hellish war is. But I don't think that makes sense, because he didn't show the brutality and the gore. It was a movie without a lot of violence, so there was this tension and this very tense vibe set up, especially by the music, where you really feel anxious watching this movie a lot of the time, and you really felt the claustrophobia and the tension. But I don't think this is a great example of war being hell and really showing the brutality. I think he kind of shied away from that, so I don't agree with that rationalization of it. And then some people are like, well, yeah, it's a war is hell movie and also a movie that there's no heroes in war. So that's why he didn't really get into fleshing out any of these characters, is because he wanted to show there's no heroes in war, just survivors. War kind of turns everyone into a rat just scrambling to survive. But again, I don't think that's true. Watching the movie, Tom Hardy's character is clearly a hero. The end of the movie where he lands his plane on the beach, I mean, that's a great heroic moment, how he sacrifices himself. He's such a hero. The boy who gets blinded and dies, he's a total hero. So I don't think it's true that this movie kind of made everyone look just like a rat scrambling to survive, and tried to show that when you get to this situation of war, everyone's heroism goes out the window. I think that's a fine movie to make, but that's not this movie. But I will say, a lot of war movies are criticized because they make war out to be this great big spectacle, which it is for spectators, but for actual soldiers in the war, when they see all these bombs and all these people assembled in this great mass of human activity, it's not a spectacle for them. For them, it's just terror, anxiety, fear, tension. So I think you can say for Dunkirk, he's really captured a better sense of what war is actually like for soldiers, where you just feel tense and anxious watching the movie rather than creating this big spectacle. And going back to my point about the atonement scene, you could say, well, criticism of the atonement scene is, again, it's this kind of turning of war into this great aesthetic spectacle. So I guess that's an argument for why this movie didn't have that great spectacle and didn't show the scale and focused more on the mood and the tension. And then talking about the three timelines, yeah, it was cool, but I think if you say that was such an interesting exploration of the notion of time and reality that it makes all my other criticisms like invalid, I don't think it was that cool. They were made for some cool moments. So basically, the fighter pilot, it was an hour for him. The rescuers, the civilians, it was a day for them. And for the people actually on the beach, the soldiers, it was a week. It made for some cool moments when you first meet the soldier who has PTSD and you see him just a wreck, and then a few scenes later, but chronologically on a different timeline, earlier in time, he's still confident and a captain commanding people. That was interesting, and it helps create balance for the story. So rather than having a lot of the story about these soldiers on the beach and then introducing the civilians rescuing them and the fighter pilots kind of later, it allowed for an even distribution of the different things you wanted to focus on in the story. But that was kind of more of just a practical rationale for why he had this. I think if you hype this up to be like Inception and just really playing with time and all that, I don't think it's this great philosophical thing. It's more of a gimmick which creates for some cool moments, makes you want to rewatch it because you don't realize there's the timelines the first time you watch it initially. So rewatching it, you may notice stuff you didn't notice the first time. So it's a gimmick. It's practical because, like I say, it allows you to balance your aspects of the story. And it is kind of interesting, but I don't think it's this groundbreaking, brilliant thing that should outweigh all the other flaws of the movie. And I will say that opening shot of the flyers raining down that say in German, "Surrender or you will die," and then everybody but the one guy dies. Great opening shot. I loved how when all the soldiers are huddled together, just waiting for the air raid and just praying that the bombs land somewhere else, and you just feel the helplessness that you just can't do anything. Those were great scenes, and I loved something I didn't know about the conflict, how the people who were rescued, for them, they had failed at their mission. It was a disaster, so they thought they were going to come back home and be booed and be hated, and just that wonderful feeling they must have felt when they realized that no, that wasn't how the public was perceiving it. They were perceiving it as this great victory. I thought that was great, so I won't say at all that this was a bad movie. I just feel like Christopher Nolan made some choices as a director, and I think everyone looked at those choices he made and just assumed that, oh, because he made the choice that way, that automatically made it a better movie, and no one's critical at all about the choices, and no one thinks, well, what if he didn't make that choice? What if he didn't choose this minimalist approach? What if he did include some of the backstories of these characters? What if he did flesh them out more? What if he did add some more context? Would that have been a worse movie? No, I think it would have been a better movie. So I think that there should be more criticism and more back and forth and dialogue about whether or not those choices, yes, they're very interesting, and I think they're interesting choices, and they should have spurred debate, which can help, film and can help, people become better at directing movies. But I don't like how everyone's just universally praising every choice he made and saying, yeah, that was a great choice, that was a great choice, that was a great choice.